Welcome to Less Than 15, a show for busy business owners brought to you by DFK Australia, New Zealand. Each week we deliver bite-sized, actionable insights from industry experts so you're across the issues that really matter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus. Let's dive into this week's topic. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of the Less Than 15 podcast. Now today we're going to be diving into the topic of ESG. It's an acronym you may have heard of. It stands for Environmental, Social and Governance, and it's a way that we can assess your business's sustainability and your ethical impact. Now, possibly the first thing that comes to mind is why? This isn't important to me. This is more for the big end of town. Well, we'd like to enlighten you with some insights that actually may change your mind and have you look more closely at this concept. And that's what my guest today is all about. Now, Chaitanya Mawji is going to be demystifying ESG and why it actually is important to SMEs as well. Chaitanya is the audit director of our DFK firm CIB in Parramatta, and he has a particular interest in this topic. So, Chai, thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to digging in.
Thanks, Angela. Definitely look forward to being part of this.
Fantastic. Well, let's really get in here and let's start with, is this ESG a nice to have, or do you see it as it really does have an impact on business success?
Look, I think it's absolutely no doubt about it. It depends on how you think about things. There are people who will just go about and say, hold on, just too many slogans around. But it
Mm.
absolutely has an impact on businesses. And in particular, I would even say small and medium sized businesses. I would look at it from a too broad category why it's actually relevant. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you look at more strategic side of things, if you wish to stay competitive, your competitors are out there looking for the best way to beat you. Yeah, this is a field. So for you to stay competitive, for you to position yourself in a market that, you know what, you are the business people need to come out to, you need to be aware of this. And look, any business needs the right people, and I think
Mm.
having the right level of talent, the right people, absolutely needed. So if you think you need people, I think you definitely need to pay attention to what the ESG is all about. And look,
Mm.
secondly, sometimes you may think, hold on, I'm not too worried about the bigger picture and stuff. You might be forced, from a compliance perspective, and regulations are out there. And for small businesses, regulations are never a nice thing to do, right? Because it's all about compliance, but you'll be forced to. At the moment, we have a whole lot of regulations already in play. Yeah, so it's not something new. A lot of businesses do need to comply with some elements of ESG already
Mm-hmm.
at the moment. But what you will find is it's a moving target. Its regulations are shifting all the time. Your suppliers may demand. So even if you are not required to comply with things, your suppliers may actually force you to comply with
Mm.
certain elements of it. So absolutely, I think it's not just about doing good. I think it's actually about staying competitive and really future proofing your business.
Mm. I love how you're looking at that from both sides. That yes, whenever we hear the words compliance and the red tape, which can make some of us sigh, but it is a part of business, especially if you were a part of a supply chain, like you were speaking about with your suppliers. And but also the strategic side, it can be a positioning tool, especially with some of our potential employees being more attracted to an organisation that has this front and centre. My daughter would tick that box for sure. So let's have a look. From our conversations in the past, I've noted that there's probably three key areas which really have impact for us to be aware of. One of those being capital and investment. Another one that you've touched on is your market and customer expectations. And the third one being, as I was just mentioning, people and recruitment. So let's break these down. How does ESG affect funding and financial opportunities potentially for SMEs?
Look, I think it's getting more and more critical from what it used to be before.
Mm-hmm.
Simple thing, banks today are looking to actually demonstrate that they are also doing the right thing. They are investing in the right right industries in the right projects. So if
Mm-hmm.
you as a small business, medium sized business, are ready to invest, say, in an energy efficient appliance or machinery, what you may find is you actually may have a better funding opportunity. More options are available. I recently had a client in the construction space, and they got a project to build some aged care homes, a bit more of the social homes. And when they actually went to the banks and said, look, I actually need a loan to construct these buildings, these houses in this particular space, the banks actually gave, bent over backwards to actually help them.
Ah.
And what was interesting is actually the interest rate which was being offered. And this is not just for big construction, even for your normal home. If you actually find that you are meeting certain criteria, banks will
Mm-hmm.
actually give you something called a green loan where the rate is a lot better than what you might have otherwise. So a whole lot of options available these days.
Fantastic. Well, I've just made a note of that one for myself. So let's look at our market and customer expectations in this area. What impact or opportunities are there here?
Look, it's definitely a marketing age, and look, it the customer profile is very important. What age your customers are. I'll give an example, especially with younger customers who are a bit more aware of these things.
Mm-hmm.
You see that happening day in, day out. You mentioned your daughter earlier. My daughter, I remember taking her shopping and she wanted to get some makeup. God knows what that was. I saw lots of options there. I said, just pick one up and move on. And she's like, no, Dad, I just want to see if there is animal testing written over there. And I'm like
Mm-hmm.
thinking, they are already making judgments about what to buy based on certain elements.
Mm.
So there's a whole lot of things which can happen in this space. You are a young family. You want to give your kids, the best food out there, the healthy foods. Eggs is a major issue these days. You may not get enough eggs, but you know what? Free range eggs, if you actually get that as an option, people will be willing to pay an extra dollar
Mm.
just because it's an organic product. So absolutely, I think customers are making buying decisions based on some of these elements at the moment.
That's such a great point. I think about the farmers market that I go to where I live, and I do go and buy the eggs specifically from a supplier whose chickens are free roaming. It is more expensive, but it is a conscious decision, that small piece. So that can be definitely a positioning tool. It's a great point. So let's look at that third area, people and recruitment. What's the impact and the opportunity here?
Look, getting the right talent and retaining that talent, I think, is a challenge for every business, regardless of the
Yeah.
size, and tends to become even more of a challenge when you are actually running a small to medium sized business. And what we are finding is people will actually ask questions. Previously, there might be, I just need a job. Can I just do that? Now, people will actually look at your website. They will see what you stand for. Do
Mm.
you offer a little bit of flexibility from a work life balance perspective? Do you have a diverse team with you? And that just becomes an attractive option to recruit the young talent which you may need in the business, or to actually retain the people. So there's a whole lot of things you can do in this space, rather than just giving, yep, I'm giving you a pay and that's absolutely needed, but there's a whole lot of other things you can do.
Mm. And I know I've read research that says that once you hit a certain amount of pay, that no longer becomes the most important thing to you. There is, because I could go and get that at many different companies. There's other things that are very values based, including that flexibility that you spoke about, which can have a
Absolutely.
huge impact on choices. It's interesting. There's more options in here that come under the label of ESG that I wasn't aware of, and I'm sure our listeners possibly feel the same. Okay, well, let's flick to the other side of the coin. When we talked about, just briefly, you referenced at the start about the compliance imperatives. So, how soon are these ESG regulations going to trickle down and force the hand of a small to medium enterprise?
So I'll give an example specifically about carbon or climate reporting. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
talks about, the climate challenge. Obviously, Australia didn't want to stay behind. We introduced climate reporting, and it's already in law. It's already effective now, but it's starting at the top end of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm a small, medium-sized business, why should I care? Somebody else has to report. But the top end of the town, as an example, need to report on their full footprint. Yep, carbon footprint. And they need to look at who their suppliers are. And
Mm.
there's a very good chance a small and medium-sized business is either supplying to this large business or is supplying to someone in between who supplies to the large business. You don't need to comply with it, but because your customer or the person who stands next to them need to comply, so they start asking, and we have seen this happen. I
Mm.
recently had a case where a client received tender request, and the tender request clearly had, give me your electricity bills. Just didn't make sense. Why would you need electricity bills? But people are actually asking for information, and that's actually forcing you. It
Mm.
is definitely a moving target, any regulation. So even if your business is not required at this stage, clients may force you to do that.
It's coming. It's on the horizon. There's
100%.
So if we look then, as we're coming to a close on this conversation, looking through the lens of it's an investment rather than an expense, how could we close off on that point and help reframe that in our listeners' ears and possibilities?
Look, businesses can take this as a compliance issue, and I just need to do ABC. And what
Mm-hmm.
they will then do is they'll say, look, it's a cost. And the word cost means it's a loss.
Mm.
Yeah, you're a small business size, small, medium sized business. Money is very important, right? You want to manage your cost. On the flip side, where a business says, look, there's absolutely an opportunity here, you can turn it and say, look, there's an investment needed, and that investment may result in cost savings. If you just decide to go for an energy efficient appliance, you may get better funding opportunities. Yeah. Or you might say, look, I may have stronger customer support or employee loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, what you will find is it becomes an investment which results in a profit. They may not result in an immediate profit, but it's profitability over a period of time.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is a great opportunity to suggest to our listeners that they start, let's say, doing a little bit of Googling around how does ESG impact on my industry, as we were talking before we hit record. And I know that we will be having a webinar with you in June, which will allow you to dive a lot more deeply into this topic and all the different parts, moving parts within it. So I'll make sure that I put the link so our listeners can register in the show notes and also under the video if you happen to be watching. So Chaitanya, thank you so much for your time today. You have lifted the lid on something new for our SMEs to look at, as you said, an investment rather than just a cost. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Angela.
So, my lovely listener, check out the details in the show notes or under this particular video. We'd love to see you at the ESG webinar in June. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Less Than 15 and have a fresh idea or two to take action on. Hit the subscribe button so you catch every bite-sized business bulletin. And we'd love you to leave a review or perhaps share the episode with a friend. Less Than 15 is brought to you by Accountants and Business Advisors DFK Australia New Zealand, helping business owners make better decisions through local knowledge, national connections, and global reach. We'll be back next week with more valuable insights to help you and your business grow.